Call to order of the meeting of March 4th, 2019. Shall we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. So can we do the roll call, please?
Are these, they're not even on, are they?
I don't think so.
Wait, you have it over here on this screen, the middle screen between you, if you say all on, or mic's on.
Testing.
Yeah.
Come on, you wonderful thing.
Is your stuff time out?
Shutting down.
I told him
Can we have the roll call, please?
Dick O'Bervin,
Here.
Jim Senyak,
Here.
Scott Reynolds,
Here.
Robert Reigard, Hank Laurent,
Here.
Edward Sable, Ken Van Portfleet,
present.
Raymond Hammond, Joseph Young.
Here.
There's a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Robert did call in, so
Oh, he didn't call. Okay. Thank you.
motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. Now on to the minutes. Is there a motion to approve these minutes?
So moved.
Support.
Discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Public comments. I see no one out there, so I think we can move directly into the old business. There are 3 items. The first is the short-term rental ordinance review draft text amendment. So, Laura, can you help us with that?
Yes, thank you, and good evening, Commissioners. So in your packet, there are 3 different items related to the short-term rentals. The first is a cover memo that McKenna prepared. The second is the short-term rental regulation ordinance in draft itself, which the village attorney has prepared. And then the third item is a good neighbor guide for renters, which was also prepared by the village attorney. And this is something, short-term rentals, that the village has been talking about for some time, acknowledging that short-term rentals do exist in the community already and that it's in the best interest to provide some regulation in order to protect our neighborhoods and the quality of life that residents have come to expect. So the memorandum that was prepared by McKenna highlights some of the sections of the proposed rental ordinance with specific green highlighting and footnotes that calls to a couple key sections of the ordinance that perhaps might warrant some additional discussion with the Planning Commission, but of course we're happy to talk about the entire ordinance as well. And then pending any recommendations or changes to the ordinance, we'll incorporate those comments, work with the village attorney on making those changes, and then at a future time, a future meeting, hold a public hearing specific to the ordinance. And then at that time, then the commission would consider a recommendation to the village council. And we're happy to take any direction by the commission, the administration, and the council on proceeding with the short-term rental ordinance. So if it pleases the commission, we could go through, starting on packet page 12, the different sections of the ordinance.
That sounds good.
Okay, thank you. So the first section that was drafted deals with the purpose. This we have no comment on. This is very similar, if not the language that we provided earlier in November, on recognizing short-term rentals exist and wanting them to be harmonious with the community. The second section deals with definitions. And I think just to point out very quickly, local agent, which is the first definition maintains that the local agent must live or maintain a physical place of business within 45 miles of the rental unit that is to be used for short-term rentals. And this is something that we saw identified by the Michigan Planning Association as a best practice for the state, and that is why it's recommended in here. The first item that we would like to bring up for discussion relates to the bottom of packet page 15, where it defines a short-term rental. And of course, we want to define a short-term rental as a single-family residence. This is probably the most common type of Airbnb or short-term rental. But then it also prohibits any attached dwelling units in a multifamily development. And what we're recommending is consideration of those multifamily units, if the commission would agree, because without that, it would exclude downtown units, and we do see that as a driver for short-term rentals. So that would be something for discussion, and within the purview of the commission to decide if you wanted it or not.
Can we tonight just hop in when you want to say something? Now, I have a question about this, which is, this may sound silly, but how could a multi-family dwelling, condominium, project, motel, and so on be a short-term rental? I mean, you would rent out a nursing home?
I think the states, I'm not sure I'm looking at the right document, but it says attached dwelling units in a multifamily dwelling.
Oh.
So we've just added language to essentially not, because you could, if you were in a condo complex or a united building, it's not a single-family dwelling, right? Is that you were just kind of covering our bases for you're a resident of multiple types, you're still allowed to have.
So that means that, for example, in the new condo unit, somebody could rent out one of their units as a Airbnb.
They're correct. I mean, if that building owner allowed that within their lease agreement.
Because if that's what it means, it sounds like a negative to the neighbors who thought they were going to be having regular neighbors, and instead somebody bought a condo for the specific purpose of having a rental unit that they would rent out on a short-term basis. And I think that sounds pretty awful.
Well, so I wouldn't disagree with that concern, but I would maybe jump in with this and being familiar with, let's say, condo documents, and personally myself, like our place up north actually has a provision that does not allow short-term rentals, and this is long before Airbnb came about. It says 12 months or greater.
Or greater. So,
and that's just purely on an association basis. So for me, I think this covers that, allows that if you're going to be a short-term rental of whatever type of dwelling that you have, there has to be some parameters. And for me, that is more of a personal issue between building owner and residents. You might not live there based on that. Because truly right now, if they allow it in their lease, there's nothing that, whether we decide to do it or not do it here tonight,
so you
changes
think that. Just to take that new condo as another example, that it may be written into their association agreement that they cannot have short-term rentals in their association. And then that would be okay as far as the ordinance in our town? Well, if it went against the ordinance?
Because their governing piece would trump that. They aren't even allowed to do it, whether we have an ordinance or not. Because this isn't, subject to everyone. If someone rents a property, there's usually provisions that says you can't have subletters underneath the property owner. So for me, I think big picture-wise, this just sets ourselves up to have a few more parameters on short-term rentals for any property type, and if they do or don't allow it, we didn't move into a place that allowed weekend rentals for that reason.
So, and what you're saying is that this actually allows us to have more control over this, not less control.
It doesn't exclude a specific resident type just because they're in a, quote, condo versus a single-family home or we already have, previously we had covered motel, resort, campground, traditional housing, but we did not cover multifamily dwelling or condo unit. So I think that's more of a issue between property owner and, you know, association, and whether it's a condo or not. And I think from my understanding, those are all leased, you know, they're apartments. So I doubt they don't have a provision in today's world that excludes that. So I think that, for me personally, that's a fine add. To make a comment on the 45-mile mark or not, I think I'm all for kind of setting ourselves up for best practice. My only comment is there a way to either appeal or create, you know, not to get lost in exemptions, but if they had a property manager or something like that, does that still allow that? You know, so there's at least a primary point of contact within 45 miles versus, you know, the property owner themselves.
Well, they
Well,
could have a management company run it.
True, and that's my point, is that if you own it or not, as long as they have someone hired or something, or to say, yeah, I'm not within 45 miles, but my property management company is.
This is my designee.
Right, yep. We're essentially trying to say if there's an issue,
45
you
minutes, you mean?
miles, yeah, I forget what the.
It's a
yeah,
minutes.
okay, so, right, whatever the designation is, you drive 100 miles an hour. Other than that, I mean, I kind of still go back to like, do we want to do this or not? I think for me, it at least allows for one more step to, if we need to step in, we can. Where right now, the current issue is that we can't. Right? I mean, and that's kind of the big step on that one.
Yeah, I have two. And I agree with Mr. Reynolds' comments so far. I was a little bit confused, and I'm trying to find it here, about the statement of B and B, the bed and breakfasts. It looks as if they're exempt, but it says with special land use. So I wanted to ask for clarification on that, and that is where is it here? It is item section 2, definitions, short-term rental, and it's the very last portion which goes on the following page. It says, these are the following facilities shall not be considered short-term rentals. And it says substance abuse rehabilitation clinics, mental health facilities, and other similar healthcare-related facilities, and bed and breakfast facilities with limited special land use. So if I had a B&B and I knew that you might, or you'd come knock on my door and said, hey, you're in violation, what's to prohibit me from, I'm sorry, if I have a Airbnb, now I'm going to just make it a bed and breakfast. Is that not a different term? And I could get like a loophole exemption there where now I'm going to just be a bed and breakfast and I could still operate?
Don't bed and breakfast, do you live in the house?
Yes.
I think that it's a difference of how it's defined. There are specific standards for bed and breakfasts in residential districts, including that no guest shall stay on the premise for 14 consecutive nights.
So is that what the limited special land use means? That's got to be permitted as a B&B?
Yes, and that would require a public hearing and the notice of the neighbors and to go before the commission for discretionary.
There's another step there.
All right, I'm satisfied with that. When it gets down to the fines, well, here I'm going to go to item K, section 3, item K, which is an administrative fee. I don't think it should be $20. It should just be named as an administration fee. If we need to adjust that as we go, we can.
Yes.
So,
And I think that's in your cover document, I think, right?
Yes,
Pulled that off.
that's one of the items that we called out, and we completely agree. It should be at the flexibility of the village council. You know, if this is implemented, you know, perhaps after a year, you might want to review the fees that you've collected and the administrative time associated with that, and also maybe a review of surrounding community fees on short-term rentals. And that gives you the flexibility to adjust and, for those differences as time progresses.
Thank you. Section 5 violations. This is the last one I have. Item 1, short-term rental of unregistered dwellings. A violation of this article is $100 for a first violation. I think it should be $100 per day of violation. Because if I have a Airbnb and I just rented it for 7 days at $500 a day, and you come by and say you're in violation, I'll give you your $100.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You know, and so, but if you tell me it's $100 per day, and I think similarly, the next one should be $200 per day if you have this same issue.
And then that begs the question, is that even enough?
Okay, we will definitely make the village attorney aware of those comments. I'm not sure where the fines were taken from, if it's something that already exists in the ordinance or if there's some sort of limitation.
Right, because one of the things, if we have an illegal activity, we'd like to have a cease and desist and stop. You know, I'm sorry, maybe your vacation plans got cut. Maybe you did not have good information when you were told what you had here, but a continuation, if it's day 1 of 7 days, so you have the point.
Well, I think my position on this whole thing is looking at it not from the point of view of the really good people who come in and don't abuse this, but looking at it from the point of view of the bad people who rent them, annoy the neighbors with music and parking and commotion and too many people and everything, to really try to figure out how can we make sure that if these things are being done in our community, that they are being done the way we want it to be done, which is smaller groups, maybe families, maybe couples and so on, and not 20 frat guys coming in for the weekend and, you know, drinking like crazy and throwing beer bottles outside and going all over the lake, peeing on the side of buildings and that sort of thing. So it seems to me, you know, Ken brought up $100 for a first violation, $100 per day. Even that is not enough to me. That is not enough. That is not a big, that it should be a very serious penalty.
500 plus something.
Yeah.
Whatever, yeah.
And the same thing is $100 for a first offense if they exceed the maximum occupancy, because that's a very serious problem, because exceeding the maximum occupancy, if it's supposed to be 8 people in there, 25 in there, and everybody chips in $100, I mean, then it's no skin off their nose. And so I think that these need to be awe-inspiring fines for the violations, such that, you know, we seem like a very unwelcoming community to people who are going to abuse these things. And I'll just say, as a kind of an aside, I was in Paris, France last week, and it so happened that the Airplane magazine dealt with Europe and the problem of Airbnbs. And there are actually entire countries right now that have decided to make them just not legal. And that's because they have proven to be so problematic for the neighbors who have tourists coming into their beautiful communities, and some of them are okay, but many of them are not. And it's such a problem in that continent that they are really restricting them. And this is not Europe, and this is not Denmark. You can't do this in Denmark anymore. But I think Lake Orion is a beautiful community that is nearby to universities, and it's nearby to, you know, people that might want to come up here. And I think we need to tighten this we need to tighten it and make it seem very restrictive. I think that our fellow residents will be grateful that we did that instead of making it easy. Anyway, we didn't even like the idea of rentals in the first place, short-term rentals. You know, we were always trying to make this a residential community. So now all of a sudden this kind of opens up the door to proliferated rentals, people buying properties to rent them out, which would be a very big negative. So I'm not in favor of these things around here. I'm really not. I think we're too small to have it do. And I agree with Scott that we have to have something here. We have to have an ordinance to control this. It's going to happen. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate the effort to come up with an ordinance, but I think there are things that can make it harder for the people that want to do this.
So in your thoughts, do you think at least a first step would be is higher violation?
Yes, I do. I think higher violation fees would be helpful.
Well, overall, I'm not sure if we're exactly ready to hold a hearing or have a final draft of this, but I would be in favor of at least holding a hearing. But I think we need to kind of nail down some of the pricing things first. So I'd make a motion to table, I guess, old business item A, short-term rental ordinance review draft text amendments. And it sounds like my fellow planning commissioners have provided some direction or at least some information that we're looking for to kind of lock this up and ask for some, you know, maybe a breakdown of fees, and then we can lock it in.
So
Yes, it is. Sorry, it's a long motion.
You're proposing, you want to postpone it, not table it. If you table it, you're implying you're going to deal with it again tonight.
Tonight?
Sure. I would like
You're
to
gonna
postpone it. I would like to take it to the next meeting with
Okay.
additional information from McKenna and Associates.
There's a second.
Excuse me.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a second.
Oh, discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. So now, old business, item number B, downtown Lake Orion dumpster enclosure discussion. Laura.
Thank you. Jennifer is going to recap the dumpster ordinance update, as she's been the primary point of contact between Molly and the village administration.
Good evening, Commissioners. The memorandum you have before you gives a brief description of the background on our dumpster discussion thus far, and then an update of our progress that is ongoing currently as to a number of items such as the dumpster location and placement, shared dumpsters, dumpster agreements, and then dumpster enclosures. We do look forward to having an update and a more detailed update for you at the April meeting that will be more inclusive and perhaps a draft text amendment that we can discuss and bring forward to the public.
I just have a quick question. Is there any motivation than our intent of what we think we might improve upon, or is that too early to discuss or have an idea of where we might go with this?
No, I think, there's like these items that we've listed. The ordinance doesn't necessarily go into a lot of detail about these so far. So I think it's really just developing these standards for dumpsters, specifically in the downtown area.
My point of view on this would be, and I know what we're trying to do in downtown, and I think it's a great thing, but I think we ought to make that everywhere in the village.
I agree. The 24 corridor would be the example.
Absolutely.
Because we've got some things that go on up there that
Yeah.
are interesting.
Totally agree.
And I would like to suggest, because all we have is a criteria, that you're kind of, in a simplistic manner, but I happen to think about security. I assume something like that would be in shared or in dumpster agreement, because they really should be locked. And I'm not sure if there's lighting that we might consider as well. Maybe not. But I know that there's been cases where some of our dumpsters downtown have been used for other purposes, other people that don't have a reason to have stuff done, and I call that a violation. So if someone puts their stuff in that dumpster, there should be a violation consideration as well. Just a couple quick thoughts.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I think there's a huge ability to improve our dumpster location downtown, even from a, limiting site and limiting, gaining parking spaces. And right now we say, what do you do with trash? And most people go, I don't know.
Really?
Well, their option is to put it at the curb,
Right.
And we really want it to be controlled in a better method, where there's other cities to this point is they say, well, you're going to be part of the trash program and haul it down the street to that community dumpster down there.
Yeah, and I was just going to, exactly, should we not have in here that if you're served by a dumpster residential downtown, that you no longer have street pickup?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That should be a portion of it.
Yep.
If you're non-commercial served.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think doing the 24 corridor in conjunction with the road is a good piece to clean that whole thing up.
Yep.
I would like to make a motion to receive and file the McKenna Downtown Lake Orion Dumpster Enclosure Discussion, update number 3, memorandum dated February 28, 2019.
Support.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, well, that brings us to the 2018 Planning Commission Annual Report and 2019 Work Plan. Laura.
Thank you. As we discussed at the February meeting, it is the responsibility of the Planning Commission to prepare, in accordance with the state statute, an annual report of its activities and its work plan for the coming year that would be submitted to the Village Council for approval and consideration. And so the draft plan before you is for your consideration, and we're happy to amend as necessary. And then this would be signed by Madam Chairperson and then forwarded to the council. You'll see that the Planning Commission met 9 times last year. It had a total of 8 applications. This doesn't include any text amendments that were considered. And then planning and zoning permits, there were a total of 92 last year. And this is an increase of 11 from 2017. In 2019, we've listed some potential projects for the village's consideration. The first would be an update to the master plan that would really focus on redevelopment-ready best practices, so transportation and circulation, including the M24 corridor, the downtown district, and pedestrian and bicycle mobility. Development of an implementation plan and action plan. This is something that isn't current in the ordinance, in the master plan. And would also provide an updated future land use map that would prioritize areas for village initiated rezonings. And this could largely leave the 2002 master plan intact. It would only have to update sections that the village saw as needing attention, and then could really divert its focus to special areas. That is the top recommendation to consider this year. Other recommendations include the RRC, pursuing that certification, the potential for a joint planning technical training session. This, I think, was done in the fall of 2016, was the last one, with the Village Council and the BZA and the Planning Commission. And there have been some member changes. It might be an opportune time for one. If the McKenna is not the only provider of training sessions. The Michigan Planning Association also provides training sessions. If the village would be interested in that, that's something that we would recommend either way. We found them to be very helpful in other communities, and they say that they're rewarding. And then to continue, select zoning ordinance text amendments. A number of these we're already in the process of. So for instance, the medical marijuana, taking direction from the village administration and council. The rental ordinance, continuing the dumpster enclosure and location ordinance. Also recommend parking and loading. This is something that we've talked about before, and I think the parking committee is also making advancements towards. So providing standards, not just that are comparable to ITE parking standards for the downtown, but also what about our other commercial districts? Are they reflective of today's standards? And then payment in lieu, how do we handle downtown residential parking? And then landscaping and tree removal is something that we have touched on before. The landscape ordinance is really short in the village, and after working in a number of communities and seeing what their ordinance provisions are, we would recommend that we would expand upon them and make them a little bit tighter. And then the last item is just continued review of the village website, which we are happy to do during office hours when time permits. We understand that there will be even more changes to the village's website, and we'll look for ways to improve that. If you have any questions, I'm happy to discuss and amend as you like.
I have one comment. I really appreciate the report. I think it's great, but I always like to see the increases, such as additional planning and zoning permits. We had an increase of 11 permits. What were they? Were they simply sign permits, or were they building? To me, that would be helpful.
Sure.
This is kind of an internal comment or a comment directed towards Joe. Do we have or are considering some of these items and the costs that would be part of them, like the master plan updates, even selective at a very high level sense, or redevelopment ready? Do we have the ability to allocate $10,000 towards these things, or?
Yes. It's in the preliminary budget at this time.
I guess from my perspective, I think, not to get lost in master plans, but they are a useful tool, especially on a high-level sense. And then knowing the benefits that feed into, let's say, a redevelopment ready certification from the MDC, I think that's a great thing that we should totally be pursuing, or some program thereof. We got some great motives, and I think we have some properties, and if you're not familiar, you essentially aren't subject to the resources and funding if you're not a certified community. So there's some benefits, and there's other programs out there that are similar to it. Because I know I've went to workshops, and being a local architect, even though it's some investment we have to make up front, there's bigger gains on the backside for the property owner, or for someone to purchase, let's say, like the Eamon Center, or whatever, other property that might be there, let's say even existing owners of the Masonic Temple, and those things that could really assist them and play a key role. So I'm in support of kind of this proposed work plan. I think it's important that we don't keep kicking, that ball down the field, because it's, when we've only looked at it 10 years ago or more, I think it's time to kind of bring it forth and at least open up a couple of those and talk about, what we've seen develop so far and where we might want to go in the future, even if it's just in the sense of some of these primary topics like dumpsters and medical marijuana and parking and landscaping and things.
I'd like to make a motion to have the Planning Commissioner Chair sign the document presented and submit to the Village Council.
Support.
Discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so thank you. New business. McKenna's monthly report. Laura?
Thank you. This is a continuation of the report that we've been providing that lists Planning Commission activities and all the different permits. There is a carryover on here from 2018 permits that are still outstanding if the application is incomplete and we're waiting on the applicant to provide some more information. We've denoted them as 2018 only, and they are not included in the current month or the year to date, since they were already counted in 2018. If you have any questions about the projects, Jennifer and I are both here to discuss them.
Any questions about the projects?
No, ma'am.
Receive and file.
Support.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Well, that brings us to commissioners' comments regarding planning and zoning matters. Ken, would you like to start us off?
I'm good this evening. Thank you very much.
Okay. Hank?
Again, I would like to thank Joe for making sure the computers work right for us.
Just a quick comment. Parking ad hoc committee has been meeting on a frequent basis, and I think we got some changes rolling out here beginning in April, hopefully, for some additional enforcement and some further kind of information about employee and residential parking.
Okay, I would just like to say I was happy to see you take on the landscaping text amendment, because I think we're due for some update on the trees and the organization of our landscaping in this community. So thank you for that.
Just two quick things. One, the council did adopt new goals and objectives, which I should pass on to you, two of which we talked about tonight, which is the redevelopment ready community, which Molly and I already met with the state director, and we're proceeding with the classes that are coming in and the resolution and the documentation to be certified. So we're moving forward on that. And as far as the landscaping, the council also in their goals said they want to reestablish or establish a beautification commission.
Oh,
I like that.
Look at that instant action that just occurred tonight. Our discussions like instant
You
action.
read your mind.
yeah.
We are on the ball. The village is on the ball. All the boards and the committees are on the ball.
On ball, on the ball.
You got it.
Good.
Don't mess around.
We're trying.
Okay, well, the next regular planning commission meeting will be Monday, April Fool's Day, 2019. So,
Move to adjourn.
Support.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, good night.